Hello and welcome back to another true video. Today I'm doing a 25.15 support tier list, serve Java content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were only 3 changes towards the support role this patch, but they were towards some of the more popular and more competitively skewed supports at the moment. Rail, Braum, and Alistar all received nerfs. In the case of Braum, this is a follow-up nerf after his already 5 base armor nerf. This is another 7. I believe his armor now goes from 42 to 35, and I believe he also lost 0.2 armor growth. Alistar lost a flat 7 as well, and Rail lost 25 armor on her shield. This ended up being the smallest of the changes. She is being going to receive a follow-up nerf in 25.16 as well. So let's get into it. The D tier is going to consist of the same 5 champions, to which, even with the correct builds and optimization, still doesn't perform very well as a support. I would not recommend him unless you are very, very comfortable with the playstyle. But even then, you're just going to get more value out of another option. I just don't believe the pick really outvalues anything unless you are very, very ahead of the curve, like you're snowballing quite aggressively within the game, which kind of relies on like cheeses or like very, very high knowledge of kind of what you can get away with the pick. MF is also just a pick I'd recommend completely avoiding. Not really balanced for support anymore, or at least hasn't been for like many years in her current state, and it's just a pick I'd kind of recommend completely avoiding. In the case of Malphite, I think he is a bit better than the other two. He is a bit, he's obviously niche and tends to be only paired alongside the Yasuo, but his harass with the Q poke combined with the ultimate does give him some increased value. It's not unplayable. It's not particularly good though, and I'd recommend avoiding it unless obviously you just want to play it as like a cheese pick alongside the Yas. Veigar also within the D tier, his kit just isn't very good for support at the moment. A lot of the items which he's abused from like the past just aren't either the same, aren't as good, and as a pick he kind of is only really built around his cage and I guess upfront burst damage here. And for that, I'd recommend kind of just avoiding him because he just doesn't get enough value out of those in his current state. Ashe, also within the D tier, she's a bit better than the other 4 options, but is like the most elite skewed out of them. She requires incredibly high level of like mastery, and just like you need to get so much out of the champion early. Either that through just like pushing someone out of lane, or you're getting a lot of value out of the ultimate. Overall, it's also just a pick I would recommend avoiding, but there is genuine value, like if you are looking to like abuse someone out of lane, you're just like setting up with ultimates throughout the game. Moving on to the C tier then, we're going to lead off with a Mumu. The pick has, obviously, a lack of itemization when played support, but he's very simple to play, has great CC within his kit. That's kind of the value of the champion when played support. You're not really going to see it outside of maybe, like, MF and Samira. Those are, like, the more common things he was paired alongside, at least in the past. The case of Renata, she is still underperforming. Her itemization just isn't as good at the moment, and as a kit, she was kind of like a lot of what her competitive presence came from being paired alongside Kalista. I still think the champion though, as like a standalone, if you can play it really well and you can use the range combined with like the harass she has within laning phase, I think she does have more value than that. Like she is by nature kind of elite skewed in that regard, which is why for like average elos I just wouldn't really recommend the champion in her current state. Mel once again falls victim to the fact that if you Emax on this champion, she's probably like a high C, B tier champion. If you max Q, she is a low C, maybe even D tier pick within support. Really comes down to which spell order you're maxing on this pick more than anything. Would I recommend her over some of the other major ports? Probably not. I think she's a bit too gold, not even gold dependent, but like, to an extent gold and XP dependent, and the same with like all like carry supports for the most part, is you have to get a lot of value out of their overall just damage, otherwise they will just be worse off than like your enchanters or your just engaged supports, which can work on a considerably lower amount of income. Silas as a counter pick is something you can opt into, and honestly with the jungle changes next patch, Silas will be a 4-way flex pick, but in that regard, do I suddenly think you should start playing Silas more? Probably not. But if you've played Silas in the past and you're comfortable taking him into maybe like a Varus plus Leona, then I think he is there as an option for you. I don't really recommend him, but you can definitely make him work if you're very comfortable on him. Yuumi is getting, she's going to be gone by next patch, like 25.16. Yuumi is a pick which you should just completely avoid. Right now, though, she's kind of in this spot where, with some of her good pairings, she's still a viable option. I still think you can go towards her. She's not that great with, like, she was just over in a too good spot before her, like, last runs of nerfs, which kind of enabled her to get away with more pairings than maybe she should have. Right now, though, yeah, you want to avoid that. Pair her with, like, your Zeris, your Lucians, some of the ones which can abuse her kit a bit more. After this patch, I just don't play Yumi. I think the champion's just going to be terrible. The nerfs are ginormous, so yeah, 25.16, avoid this pick altogether. Right now, though, it's just like a C tier, which you can kind of get away, like, can be higher, like the better the champion pairing is. Moving on to the B tier, then we lead off Tahm Kench. Just in an undesirable state ever since the like rounds of nerfs he received towards the beginning of either this split or last split. Ever since those, he's just not been that good as a top laner or as a support. I'd kind of just recommend avoiding the champion. Annie is gradually becoming unpopular again. She obviously gained a spike of popularity when Riot did some adjustments to her kit, kind of gave her a bit more baseline value through her spells, took away some power from Tibbers, it made her a bit better as a support option. That being said, though, she's not like an amazing support pick, and I don't really recommend her that much. Like, if you're comfortable playing Annie, I think you can play her here. If you're not, then you're probably just better off looking towards other options. Teemo, I think, as a niche gimmicky support can work, like into bot lanes where you can get good blind value. This pick has genuine like potential. Obviously very mid to low elo skewed. He does pretty poorly in higher MMR brackets. That goes without saying. He's a scaling pick. When you play him support, you're playing around your shrooms and you're playing like off your cube blind, like you're getting good value out of that spell. Yeah, I don't really recommend him that much, but if you want to play him here, it can work. Brand is getting buffed in 25.16, pretty sizable buff as well. Q duration is going up. I believe he is gaining, his ult CD I believe is also going down slightly, which is a nice change for him. Like, Brand will probably be either a high B tier or maybe even A tier option next patch. Right now though, considering this is like the elo bracket, which is like best for him, I don't really recommend him. He's pretty undesirable in his current state, but you can definitely make him work. Like, he has decent agency. Obviously he's going to have more agency than a lot of the other supports because he just has access to more damage, some of the most damage you can get out of a support. So that is definitely something to kind of like be aware of. Galio, Zac, limited by their itemization. I think these picks as like general, like maybe not stat checkers, but as just generic tanks with baseline kit values can be quite good options, but they're better off in like other roles for the most part, so I don't really recommend them that highly in support, but they are flex picks if you do kind of like see them that way. I think Shen kind of falls into the same bracket now, good into like a Leona blind or into matchups where they have to play into you and you can get a good amount of value out of Shen W and you can consistently land taunt onto the opponent. I think those are the main spots where you are going to be playing Shen. Hui is an AP option as in support, still pretty solid. I do like Hui. I think this is his weakest. I mean, this is obviously his weakest role. Both bot lane and mid lane Hui are in a pretty good state at the moment. But if you do want to play support Hui, like you've been auto-filled or you're just generally comfortable on the champion, there is potential for the pick. He's a little gold heavy, like that is going to be one of your bigger issues. Like, you do for the most part have to snowball quite frequently, but if you do, then yeah, I think there's genuine potential in the champion. Senna support, I don't really recommend that much at the moment. I think Senna support is just kind of it's just worse than Senna ADC. Like, if you want to play Senna anywhere, then you should probably play her in the ADC role. That being said, though, I think support Senna, if you pick it in the right games where you know you're not going to get punished, and you know you can kind of like free hit, or you can get good value out of your baseline kit, there is room for it. So I do think she sits as a B2 option at the moment, but I would just play ADC Senna if you're looking to play Senna in her current state. Pyke is not actually a B-tier champion. He is just very hard to play. Like, he is probably number 1-2 with Bard at the moment in terms of like main role supports in their difficulty. If you snowball effectively on this champion, I think he's still a great option. Does quite well in Elite in his current state. If you're not comfortable on Pyke though, you should just avoid the champion. Like, he is very hard to pilot. You need to close out games early. If you ever fall behind, if you're not confident in your ability to kind of like play aggro when maybe, or like just even like fake pressuring, then I would recommend just looking towards other options than Pyke. Nidalee is a very hard champion as well. Like, obviously this isn't main role Nidalee support. Like, Nidalee is actually quite a flexible champion in the way she can kind of, I mean, in the roles she can play. Like, she can play full roles as well for the most part. That being said though, yeah, Nidalee support, underrated. The E-spell is incredibly powerful. I think more people should honestly try it, but you do need to get more than just the E value out of the champion kit. Otherwise you just won't have that much presence in laning phase, and she needs to use her presence in laning phase. She has 6 spells at level 3, and that is an incredibly powerful thing for any champion to have, so definitely try and abuse her early laning phase to kind of get more value than just the E spell out of the kit. Blitzcrank has just been kind of underwhelming for a while. I think he's still fine though. I think if you pick him in the right games where you know you can get good hook value, then Blitzcrank, pretty solid option. You also kind of want to be comfortable with champion. Like, if you're not comfortable playing Blitzcrank, then you're probably better off playing one of the more staple supports at the moment, like your Leonas or your Rails. But if you're comfortable playing Blitzcrank, you understand how to use the hook effectively, you understand how to pressure, then I think he can still be a solid option. Seraphine, just within the beta at the moment, mostly kind of just paired alongside the Ashe. If you're comfortable pairing Seraphine alongside Ashe, then she can be quite a good option just to have within your arsenal. If you're not quite comfortable playing it, then you're probably just best off not playing Seraphine altogether and just looking towards other supports, because that is where she kind of comes out as the strongest champion. Morgana sits within the beta. She is also being buffed in 25.16. It'd be interesting to see where she lands from the changes. I believe they are slightly more mid and jungle skewed, but if I mean, they should have genuine power swing in support, so maybe she sits towards behind the B tier. Maybe she even jumps up to the A tier. I don't like Morgana's kit that much. I think it has pretty clear issues, but if she is just generally overstated, she gains a lot of power just through her spells, then I can definitely see her being an actual option once again. Swain sits within the beta. I actually think he's a bit better as a support option at the moment. Just generally quite a solid counter pick. Like, if you are playing into low damage, tanky compositions, and you understand how to play the pick, I think there's genuine value in him, and I'd say he honestly sits towards the high end of the B tier at the moment. I'm also kind of akin to Morgana, not that big of a Swain fan, because I think his kit also has, you usually feel like you're not going to get as much of the kit value when you are playing him support, like you'd be better off playing the other roles, but I do think that over time that has definitely shifted a bit more, and Swain support is a more legitimate option in the game. Lux sits within the beta. I mean, she's obviously incredibly popular, and if you understand how to kind of like use her harass within lane and like burst people out, like generally like snowball the games to be in a state which really benefits you, I think she can be quite a good option. If you're not quite comfortable with it, I do think you probably want to look towards other things. I think she probably sits towards the high end of the B tier, maybe even A tier. Like, Lux is definitely in this like middle of the pack kind of scenario where as long as you have some level of mastery and you're very comfortable with the role you hold within the game, then she definitely goes up a bit. If you're not that comfortable, then she can definitely struggle a bit more. Like, she does need to kind of know, or you do need to know what you want to do with the champion to kind of get the value out of the pick. Neeko is definitely a very skill expressive champion, and honestly she probably sits up there with like your bards and your pikes in terms of difficulty. Like, you do want to have played a lot of Neeko, or very clearly understand how her W functions, because that is going to be a lot of where your power budget is, and if you do, she's a great pick. I really like Neeko, and I think even if you into elite and even in mid MMR brackets, I think she's an incredible option. Like, she could probably even be like an S tier pick. If you don't understand how to use her W and you struggle with like the lane harass kind of aspect of the champion, then she really loses most of her value. Like, you are giving up most of her kind of like key things, and then you just end up kind of being an alt and an E-bot, and that feels pretty bad. Like, that does make her like a B, maybe even C2 option if you are just using those aspects of the kit. It's really like, it's the harass and like the W usage which is the real make or break on this champion at the moment. Fiddlesticks still sits here as like a solid option. I don't think he's quite as overpowered as obviously the kind of like Fiddle Patch was, but if you're comfortable playing with champion, you understand how to use the ultimate, you're getting good value out of the CC, I think he's still a solid B, maybe even A tier option. Once again, kind of falls into this middle of the pack area. Zeref sits within the beta. I like him as an artillery option. I still rate Vel'Koz slightly higher than him in support at the moment, so that's why Zeref is my beta option, or like high beta option. Vel'Koz is my A tier option. But if you're very comfortable playing Zeref, then he can definitely outvalue Vel'Koz. Like, they're pretty close in terms of what like I value out of like the artillery support section. Zoe, also pretty hard support to play, kind of not quite maybe the same tier as some of the other three which I mentioned, but like on your LeBlanc, your Zoe tier, where if you're very comfortable snowballing the game, you understand the base value of your kit and how to kind of abuse it, they can be really good picks. If you're not, then you're usually better off looking towards other support picks there. They kind of fall into like the niche category of like your mains or your comfortable players with them, where you can kind of just opt into them every so often and snowball or just take over a game generally. Moving on to the A tier event, we're gonna lead off with Khan. He's been kind of high B, high A, like low A, high B, low A, high B. Kind of like, once again, sitting in this middle of the pack situation. The only reason I think I have maybe Rakan as an A2 option over a B2 option is I just think he's a generally good option to have within your arsenal. Being able to opt into him when you need him is a pretty strong thing. Like, he's been a competitive staple for quite a long time at this point. Pairs nicely with like your Zayas as well. And yeah, I generally think Rakan is a pretty solid option. Pantheon sits within the A tier. Maybe not actually an A2 option, but kind of here based on the fact that I think he's easier to play than Pyke for the most part, and I think he's the best opt-in AD option. You want to take over the game as an AD support. Pantheon is probably your go-to. Obviously, Camille has existed in the past, doesn't really exist as a support option at the moment, and yeah, Pyke is like, I'd say, just too elite skewed. Like, if you're not comfortable playing Pyke, you shouldn't opt into him, which is why Pantheon, I honestly think, probably takes the spot as like the A tier AD option at the moment. Karma, now that people are playing the Shield Max build, the 3 point skew into Emax build is really quite oppressive. She has some of the strongest shields within the game. Being able to apply it to like your entire team as well, very, very strong, very good pick. And like the clear identity of being able to be like this lane phase kind of like poke mage, and then as like the fallback pattern of like the shielding and kind of playing a bit more util for the team, I think gives her a very clear identity. I like it as an option, and definitely very like good to have as an A tier pick, and just having it as like a pick within your arsenal. Maokai, bit more niche. He's very easy to play though, like good lockdown, the ultimate's very powerful, good vision with DE. I don't think you need to play Maokai. In fact, I honestly don't recommend him quite as much as some of the other options, but he's there if you need him. Like, I think he's just one of those options which you can sometimes just lean into if you know you can get good value out of the champion in the game. Thresh, people have begun to prio Thresh a bit more. I've kind of always felt like Thresh has been in this spot where people could probably just start legitimately playing him again. I don't think he's bad. Like, he's been buffed a lot of times over the years. And generally, with the other supports being nerfed around him, he will naturally rise in priority. So I think Thresh actually sits as like a mid to maybe even a high-end A tier option at the moment. So definitely a pick, worth watching. Honestly, probably worth putting time into. He's hard to play though. And a lot of the time, if you're bad at Thresh, it's noticeable. Like, you've got to be very confident in how you want to play the champion, because if you're not, you'll miss hooks. You'll look pretty useless within the game, and you'll just be outvalued by other supports playing things which are either easier to play or just have more generic value out of their kit. That being said though, Thresh has a lot of value in his kit. The Flay, the Hook, the Lantern, all very powerful tools. The box is underwhelming, I think, at this point. I think for an ultimate, it's a pretty lame spell. Either should do a bit more or should just be slightly bigger. I don't know what they want to do with that, but Thresh as a champion, I think he's a good A tier option now. So definitely something I would recommend learning at the moment. Some of your snowball AP options include like your Elises and your LeBlancs, where I think these picks are still legitimately quite good. Like, if you want to play like a more niche, non-conventional carry option support, I think your LeBlancs and your Elises are the way you should go. Zyra is being buffed next patch, so definitely gonna recommend like learning her like in this patch, because I don't think she's terrible for the CeLo bracket. I think she's definitely a bit on the like. Zyra consistently sits as an S tier option, so actually having her as an A tier is a bit weaker than she maybe usually is, but I still think she's an A tier option. I think she's a genuine pick which you can opt into in a lot of situations and get good value out of the champion. Shaco sits within the A tier. Obviously, he's also being nerfed in 24.16, primarily the AD build. Like AP Shaco support is still going to be very much the same. So if you're comfortable playing AP Shaco, you understand how to use the boxes, you understand how to kind of like use your harass with a laning phase, I still think he's going to be quite a good option here for you. And then your other AP option is your Vel'Koz. I really like him as an artillery mage. I think you can get good value out of his pick in a lot of lanes where you can just outright just either bars people down or you can just chunk them and kind of continue to layer damage on top of damage into them and kind of just deny CS and push people up lane where you can. Some of your more traditional or just like standard options, I mean, Zilean actually doesn't really fall into that bracket because Zilean is a bit more niche, but I think he's definitely on a high at the moment. Other champions being nerfed around him, it's going to definitely benefit him. He gives some of the strongest like tools to the team, the slow, the revive, the speed up, combined with like the long CC duration on double Q and the actual just like really high baseline damage of that ability. I believe it goes all the way up to 300, which is kind of crazy. Like it does have genuine kind of like baseline power. And I do think he's in a pretty good spot at the moment, so I do rate him as an A tier champion. Some of your enchanters include Soraka and Milio. I think Milio with some of his pairings can be really... That's not Soraka. Milio with some of his pairings can be really oppressive. Like your Lucians, your Jinxes, your Aphelioses, like your Hyper Carries, you can really do quite well with them. In the case of Soraka, pairs nicely alongside the Ashe, but just generally is quite a good support. Like having an enchanter like Soraka on your team will usually be quite valuable. As long as you have like engage elsewhere. Obviously if you don't have engage elsewhere, I'd honestly recommend looking towards like a Nautilus or a Leona, and that would probably be like the main kind of like line of thought. Like Rel, Nautilus, Leona, Soraka, some of your other S2 option enchanters can all be quite good. Moving on from that, you've got like your Tarics and your Poppies. Honestly, Braum I'm actually going to move these like slightly lower. Braum's weaker for sure now. Like Braum I actually don't recommend quite as much just defaulting on. He is less durable. He's going to be quite substantially easier to kill. Like losing, what is it now? 12 base armor over 2 patches is a huge amount of armor to lose. Like that is a genuine like damage reduction. I mean, however you want to look at it, like he is going to be taking more damage at the end of the day, and yeah, that makes him a less consistent option. You can't blind him as much, albeit you probably shouldn't have been blinding him at all in the previous patch, but now just using him as a counter pick, I mean even counter pick Braum is going to be less valuable, but still going to be the main way of playing him. Poppy, Taric I still think are really good options. Like there are Taric OTPs which make this champion look really good in almost any matchup and can be really, really oppressive. Like this champion has genuine, really strong and kind of obnoxious interactions. In the case of Poppy, she's a great flex pick. Maybe that like gives her a bit more value as a support because she can kind of be picked a bit earlier maybe without the guarantee of going support. But generally, as a champion, I still think she's very, very good. Nullifies a lot of the support pool. Doesn't really... I mean, you can't really blind her. I mean, you shouldn't blind her. Actually, I should just, like, state as a fact, like, Poppy blind isn't going to be something you want to do. But if you find the right support, like, matchups which you want to play her into, she can be a very good option. Right, so the main kind of like talking point of this video is like how have the nerfs affected the other 2 champions, and like obviously Braum I've just spoken about, but like how has that kind of shaken up the top of the meta? And to an extent, not that much. Ali is weaker for sure. He honestly probably sits towards the low end of the A tier now. 7 armor enough, also going to be very genuine for him, going to make him a lot squishier. He's also harder to execute than Braum, so he will probably just, I mean, I'm just going to drop him lower than Braum now. In the case of Nautilus, he now rises up as a more, like, but like as a better option. Like I think Nautilus value does go up with some of the other things around him being nerfed. Same goes for Leona. I think these 2 champions just become a lot more, like, successful as options. Like they are now the more default engage support which you want to look towards. The other pick here is going to be Bard. I think Bard is on a really high at the moment. The 5 movement speed buff, which he received a couple patches ago, was really big for him when it was already in a pretty strong spot. So Bard, I definitely recommend learning him. He's quite hard to learn though, so don't blind him in solo queue, but like if you want to like gradually learn him over time, pair him with like your Jins and stuff, I think this champion can be really valuable in his current state. And then the S tier, I've dropped Braum down, obviously, so the S tier only consists of 5 champions. Rao is still going to be my recommended go-to engage option. The 25 shield nerf ended up being the smallest out of the 3 lots of nerfs this patch for the champion which probably needed the most nerfs, so she is receiving a follow-up change in 25.16. Lulu getting nerfed in 25.16 as well, still looks like the default enchanter to go to in a lot of the like just generic enchanter spots. Obviously can be a bit more limited with some of the pairings she can go with, but generally her pairings are quite strong and still quite broad. Like your Naras and your Jinxes are very popular at the moment, and she pairs really nicely alongside those, and still can pair really nicely alongside like your Kog'Maws, for example. Nami, obviously most commonly going to be paired with your Lucians, but just generically as an enchanter, she can be paired with the most things and has a very low baseline, like a skill curve. Like you can pick this champion up and within a couple of games you should be good to go. So pretty good recommendable option in that regard. And Sona and Janna, my other 2 S tier enchanters. Janna as a counter pick can be incredibly valuable. The self pull tool she has combined with just the baseline kit value, like the AD steroid on the E, is incredibly strong, and definitely cannot be understated how valuable this pick can be in the right spots. And with Sona, I think this champion's in an incredible state at the moment. They gave her a string of buffs back along, and she's kind of been riding high of that for a while now. There are a lot of people which make this champion look bad, and obviously Sona has a pretty bad reputation. Don't be one of those Sonas. Be one of the Sonas which gets the value out of the kit and maybe doesn't just blind it. Like I think blind Sona is a pretty simple thing you can do. Even if I do think she's actually capable of getting away with a lot of angles which maybe other champions can't really get away with. So that is something to just be aware of. But if you're playing Sona, yeah, I think the champion's very strong at the moment, but you do have to be kind of careful with some of the lanes and like how you approach some of the lanes. If you're into an aggro lane, don't give them the opportunity to kind of snowball it. Play for like your mid game, your late game, where you're going to be stronger as an option. And against some of the easier lanes, you can walk up, you can harass, you can go 3 points Q, you can opt into a more offensive kind of like setup. There is capabilities for that. And overall, I think she's in a great state at the moment. So my S tier, going to be pretty solid across the board here. I do think enchanters currently look really good for solo queue, but Rao is going to be my recommended engage option. I do think a lot of the A tier and even B tier are quite competitive options. I would recommend avoiding almost the entirety of the C and D tier unless you are very like high mastery or very comfortable on one of the champions there, because that kind of like can sway it a bit more. Those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.